So let's have a look at Nio and the automotive market in general, but mostly focus on Nio and see what's happening and how the stocks have been doing over the past couple of months. We can see that it actually went to 4.78 just at the after earnings release on the opening. I think it's on the 5th of March, so a few days back, this last week. And yeah, so the stock was really down below $5, but then it quickly rebounded. And now we're at the end of the week sitting at 5.8, which is obviously good in the short term. But in the longer term, I mean, if you look at the stock price, it's still like just a carnage. I mean, a lot of stocks were overhyped back in 2020, late 2020, after the COVID crash, and also in 2021. But a lot of these stocks, the other stocks, has kind of rebounded. So if we go to the, let's say, the semiconductor segment, you can see that whatever stock you look at is basically at 52-week highs, and honestly, most of them are at all-time highs. Look at AMD, for example. So you can see there. You cannot even see like the dip in 2020. This is The same goes for Nvidia, which is even more crazy. And ARM. I mean, ARM was just they just had their IPO, and it kind of went south directly after the IPO. But then immediately now, because everything else has been going up, they're also been doing great. So yeah, back to the automotive, and you can see that it's not looking that great. The best one at this stage is Li Auto in terms of the 52-week range, but most of the others, even Tesla, is having a rough time. So what's been happening? Well, before we look at the specifics, we can see that they had this news release on the 1st of March. They always have this release at the first day of the month, which they declare how many cars they delivered in the previous month. And you can see that Nio delivered 8,132 cars and 18,187 for the first 2 months of the year. Now, this doesn't look too great, to be honest. We know that one of their best months in June and July last year, I think they actually delivered even 16,000 cars. Let's have a look. So if we go to my Nio chart and quickly look at it, the deliveries in 2023, so last year, you can see here that in July and August they were basically pushing 20,000. So basically what they delivered in their best months, they now delivered in 2 months. But that's not the whole truth, because we know that the Chinese New Year this year was in February, and it's obviously quite difficult to sell cars when everyone is on holiday. And I think in China it's like a good 10 days or 2 weeks of holidays. And in general, most people buy cars in December, so in January it's quite slow anyways. And this year, almost like the previous year, Nio especially they are gonna release the updated full year of, let's say, the new models, the new refreshed models of 2024 in April. I think in late March or early April, which is basically the same scenario as last year. So if you go back to last year, we can see that the first 3 months weren't that great. Obviously, even in 2023, people were hoping for higher numbers here. Then it completely tanked in April and May because they were only selling just a few cars because they were basically retooling the factory. So you shouldn't, I think these two, April and May, you shouldn't take them too seriously. But if you definitely look at this, you can see that these are last year's number. 8 plus 12 is basically 20,000 or thereabouts on the first 2 months, which is basically the same as this first 2 months of this year. Not great, because we would expect quite a bit of growth for this kind of growth company, but again, there's some explanations to it. So let's see where we go in. Let's see where we go in later in, I believe, like late March, where we start to see the weekly insurance registrations going up again. And you can see here actually that the weekly registration insurance numbers, the last numbers came in at 3,600 for Nio, which is quite a bit higher than Xpeng. And interestingly, they are basically holding good pace compared to Li Auto as well. Obviously, Li Auto is selling hybrids, not fully electric cars, and they are quite a bit cheaper. So in the premium ones, I would definitely say that Nio is more premium. So if you compare Nio and Xpeng, you can see that Nio is selling 50% more in this last week. Again, it's only 1 week, but you can see the same trend basically over the last 3 weeks. and Nio is selling the more expensive cars. So these are, in my opinion, not too shabby numbers. If they continue to stabilize again, you know, with going past February and the Chinese New Year, and stabilize it at around these kind of levels minimum, and then maybe once we get close to, let's say, late April, early May, when the new models for 2024 arrive, maybe we can see stabilizing around 4,500 to 5,500 cars. Then I have no doubt that Nio will have a good 2024. A bit interesting, just you should always have a look at this. Just quickly look at the lithium price, lithium carbonate price, which is one of the main components of the battery, and you can see again, we've been used to this graph now that the peaks here were not good for the car companies and their gross margins, but you can see that it's been going down quite a bit, although we can see a little bit of uptick over the last few days, but again, it's minimal. Like, we've been going from mid 90,000 to just 108,000, which is nothing compared to these prices of above 300 to 600,000. So yeah, that's the lithium price. Let's see, we should follow this throughout the next quarter and see if, you know, if we are getting towards, let's say, 200,000, 300,000, or if it's just gonna stay here between 100 and 150,000, which shouldn't be any problem for the car companies. One more point, in general, we know that, again, Chinese New Year, so you can see CNF post, give them a follow, really good and interesting, both on Twitter and also, or X I should say these days, and on the webpage. And you can see the Chinese passenger new electric vehicle wholesales for the month of February of this year, it's down 34% compared to January. And you can see this sharp decline. Again, a lot of it depends on the Chinese New Year. But interestingly, look at this dot here. You can see we are, if you go back to late 2022, and considering that this is like basically the worst month of the year, I think this actually is a good number. I definitely expect March numbers to bounce back, and April maybe we will be, I don't know, 800,000. So we spoke about the downtrend in February in general for the whole automotive segment, especially in China because of the Chinese New Year. But now let's look at Nio in a bit more detail. So looking at the earnings release, you can see the business outlook, which is interesting to me. They are expecting between 31,000 to 33,000 cars, and remind you that they mentioned here that they delivered 18,000 for the first 2 months. So on the last month of the first quarter, so basically March, they're expecting to deliver something between 15 to 16,000 cars, which historically wouldn't be too shabby. 15 to 16,000 cars is definitely up there with the best, aside from July and August. So yeah, I think it's good, despite this number of 33,000 being not that great. So why do I say that the 33,000 for Q1 is kind of okay? So if we look at the vehicle deliveries, we can see that these past 2 quarters were really good, Q4 23 and Q3 23, and we know that Q2 of last year was abysmal because of the, do you remember these numbers here? You can see here the drop here because of the only couple of cars they were able to sell due to factory retooling. But yeah, so if you take the 33,000 number, it's basically better than any quarter other than 3 of the previous ones in Nio's history. And and you should add to that it's January and February, which are Chinese New Year. Wouldn't it be for those? I think we would easily have seen at least 45,000. So yeah, I don't think it's, I think the market is kind of seeing this now. Probably people are thinking, okay, we are already in March, so in a couple of weeks we're gonna be in April, and I think in April we will definitely start to go back to 15,000, 16,000 cars a month again, which would put us back at these numbers, 55 to 50,000 cars. So I don't think that the outlook here is necessarily, I mean, it's not good for, but again, people don't invest for, you know, the next quarter. Most people, at least in these kind of growth companies, invest for a couple of years at the minimum. At least that's what you should do, even more. So yeah, I don't think this is too bad. So then let's have a look at just a few of the numbers. You don't need to look at through the entire report, but you can see that the revenue basically close to all-time high, which was the last quarter. Vehicle sales also the same. Now the interesting one is the other sales. which I spoke also on the previous earnings release. And I represented this in this chart here. You can see that the yellow one is the other sales, and it's definitely basically non-dependent on the number of delivery vehicles each quarter. This is more basically the active users. How many cars have they sold in throughout history, and how many of those people are using the Nio services, the Nio houses, the Nio. I mean, in some places they have even like childcare, I've heard, in China. You could argue that what's that for a car company, but anyways, I think this is really interesting because at this rate, the other sales are basically $1 billion at this run rate, and maybe next year we're gonna have a number close to 300 million, maybe 350 million a quarter, and that's another 1.5 billion extra per year in just basically other sales that is not directly correlated. So this is interesting. And then if you look at the cost of sales and gross profit, way better than the two abysmal quarters of Q1 and Q2 of 2023. Not as good obviously as 2022 when the vehicle prices just went through the roof. And if you remember that the average electric car is now 22% cheaper, at least according to this one report, but I've seen different numbers, but they are definitely cheaper. If you remember, in mid 2022 some of the electric vehicles had like a lead time of at the minimum 8 to 9 months. So at that time the prices were also a bit different compared to now, where the consumer market is weak because high interest rate, although we might see different let's say cuts in the rates which will at some point take back the consumers to the market, and where they will be able to invest money on the luxury products like cars, and especially Nio, which is a luxury brand of electric car, which already is expensive. I think the gross profit is okay. It's not great, but it's the bleeding, like the numbers we had here, is much worse. So it could be much worse. And I think Nio is also very heavy on research and development costs, which is, compared to the peers, good in terms that they will definitely launch more cars than Xpeng and a lot of other, and I would say they are spending more research and development money than even Tesla per capita, if you could say so. So yeah, they are really heavy on research and development. And then finally you can see the loss from operations, not that great, really high, and then the net loss is 756 million. But although this is not great, we have to consider that Nio is also having 6, 7, 8 billion on cash on hand after all these new deals that they made over the last 18 months, with the money coming in from Qatar, for example. So they are not necessarily in a bad place in terms of cash burn. But I expect, other than the next quarter, which is Q1 of the next reported quarter, which will be Q1 of 2024, other than that, due to obviously the outlook of 30,000 cars or thereabouts, I think these numbers here for Nio will definitely improve. I think we will see deliveries going up to 70, maybe 80,000 per quarter this year, and I would definitely see the revenue going above $3 billion per quarter, and maybe we could see gross profit again doubling from here, and maybe we could see halving in the loss from operations. And then there's, other than the numbers, we can also see that there were some really interesting comments from the CEO. Their second brand, Nio Alps, will be launched in Q2, and then the deliveries will be late Q3 or early Q4. And why do I look at this graph now? Well, I mean, if the second brand, the Nio Alps brand, will be launched with much cheaper price, that's definitely gonna be driving the volumes up for Nio. So I think it's definitely, with the normal lineup now, I think we can see 70,000 cars per quarter at some point this year. That would be a run rate of 280,000 in sales with those kind of numbers. And then adding to that the Alps, which will definitely sell in the long term more than obviously these more expensive cars. So I think I can see Nio sell 400,000-500,000 cars in maybe 2 years from now, annually. The CEO said that the Alps model will be 10% cheaper than Tesla Model Y, with similar performance. They also mentioned that there's another model in addition to that in development. So again, we mentioned that Nio is quite R&D heavy. And the battery swapping will be compatible with the new Alps models, the 3rd and 4th generation. Another very interesting point from the earnings release and the discussions was that the capex in 2024 will be significantly lower than 2023. They will minimize the resources and fully utilize resources for the swap station partners. So I think we can maybe see a decrease in the loss from operations, which will come from all these, swap stations that they are building up, and they cost a lot of money. We can see that they already added around 50 more swap stations in China just from January to March. And they're expected to deliver somewhere between 500 to 1,000 new more swap stations already in 2024. And that comes with huge cost and capital expenditure, but they say that they will utilize the partnerships with other car companies. So yeah, we will definitely see some help there, and that's gonna be really good for this, here when you can see the loss from operations maybe will be cut in half together with, larger sales at the end of the year. So yeah, so that's basically about it for Nio at the moment, and I think, yeah, the stock price is not great, but do I dare to say that this is the bottom? Of course I don't. I mean, no one knows, and this is not investment advice. I'm just sharing my ideas with you. But do I believe that the odds are, getting good for the long-term investors, and maybe the worst is behind us in terms of, the delivery numbers getting much better at the end of this year? And to be honest, it's not like Nio hasn't improved over the couple of few years in the past. You can see that the delivery numbers for Nio, I mean, in 2020, you can see here on the blue one, they went from 43,000 to now 160,000 to 2023. So they basically 4 times increased their number of cars sold in 3-4 years, which is really impressive for an electric car company or any automotive company. So it's not like Nio hasn't improved in that sense, and it's just that the financials haven't looked that great, and the explanations are there. Obviously, we know that the lithium price that I showed you before was not really helping gross margin at this stage, and the price cuts and the competition is really tough. But they have $6, $7, $8 billion on the bank account, and they are definitely ready to survive at least a couple of years from now on. So, and with increased sales, I don't think. I actually think the worst is probably behind us. So yeah, thank you for watching, and sorry for a very long video, and see you in the next one.